Good morning. I'm Brian Nelson, Vice President of Institutional Advancement at Dunwoody College of Technology. Welcome to our LEAD Speaker Series. This is the final event of the series in this academic year. I want to thank you all for joining us this morning. Before I introduce our speaker, I want to remind you that all of the attendees are in listen and view only mode, which means you will not be able to activate your webcam or microphone. You may use the chat feature to pose questions for the Q&A session throughout the presentation and after the presentation. And Kelly and I will work through those questions with you. It's my great pleasure to welcome and introduce Kelly Doran, founder and president of Doran Properties Group this morning. Doran will be giving a presentation on education, influences, and entrepreneurship. My story as a developer. Kelly will discuss his own journey as a developer and entrepreneur. He will share stories of his early influences, his education, and what he believes has been the key to the success of his companies. An inspirational visionary, Kelly has more than 30 years of experience in commercial real estate and has developed and owns retail shopping centers, pioneered high-end student housing in the state, and is currently one of the leading luxury multifamily developers in the Twin Cities. He employs more than 160 people at Doran Properties Group after selling his controlling interest in Doran Companies in 2019, the company he founded 15 years ago. Named the most admired CEO by the Minneapolis-St. Paul Business Journal and Executive of the Year by the Minnesota Real Estate Journal, in addition to being selected as a member of the Minnesota Shopping Center Hall of Fame, the Business Journal's National Influencers List in Commercial Real Estate, and Twin Cities Businesses Hall of Fame. Kelly is one of the most prolific developers in the upper Midwest. Kelly received his BA from the University of Minnesota and his MBA from what is now the University of Minnesota's Carlson School of Management. He and his wife Connie live in Minneapolis. He's involved in numerous civic causes and organizations. I'm really excited to hear Kelly's story this morning, so please give a very warm welcome to Kelly Doran.
Well, thank you, Brian. I appreciate the introduction, and good morning to everyone. I've had the opportunity over the years to speak in front of various groups, but I've never done this virtually. So here we go. I guess the interesting thing about this is I'm sitting here all alone and by myself in this room, and I can pretend that I'm in my own little world and that everything I say will be brilliant, right on point, and that all my jokes will be funny. That makes me sound a lot like a politician, but I'm not. Anyway, thank you for being here. My name is Kelly Doran, and I'm a real estate developer. And in many ways, being a real estate developer has a lot in common with being a politician. It seems today a lot of activists and politicians are picking on real estate developers. By some, we are called greedy. We don't build enough affordable housing. We dislocate people. We gentrify neighborhoods. I used to say that real estate developers were considered by public opinion polls to be only slightly ahead of Congress, but I'm not sure that that's even true today. But in any case, I appreciate the invitation, and I'm humbled to be here today. So what is a real estate developer? I get asked that question a lot. My kids, when they were young, asked me at dinner one night, what did a real estate developer do? I sat there thinking to myself, how was I going to explain this to my kids who were in elementary and middle school at the time? So I thought to myself, well, should I tell them that a real estate developer brings all these different types of people like architects and engineers and interior designers and structural engineers and landscape architects and traffic consultants and city planners, planning commissions, city councils, neighborhood groups, advocacy groups, other government agencies, bankers, investors, environmentalists, bike advocates, walking advocates, mass transit advocates, contractors, subcontractors, and any other interested parties together to hopefully see the developer's vision in order to build a building that will likely take years to design, get approved, and build. Well, as I thought about that, what middle schooler wouldn't want to hear about that over dinner? But knowing that they were all taking band at school, I decided to take another tact and say that a real estate developer is a lot like a band director. They looked at me kind of funny when I said that. So I went on and I said, well, a band director does not have to know how to play the violin or the trombone or the drums, but the band director needs to know when those instruments need to be played in order for the song to sound right. And that's basically what a real estate developer does. He brings all these people together, but the developer does not need to know how to be the architect or the engineer, but they need to know what the architects and engineers and contractors and subcontractors do and when they need to do it in order to build a building. That's what I told them a real estate developer was. They looked at me a little funny. They said, well, Dad, what's for dessert? Another way to think about this, and if you've heard me speak before, you might have done this previously. A real estate developer needs to have a vision and know where they're going and how to get people to go there with you. And sometimes that involves a lot of different strategies. I can demonstrate this by doing a little algebraic game with all of you. I used to do this with my kids, so it's not that difficult. And you can use your calculators or cell phones if you have them handy. But I want to do some simple math with you and to demonstrate where a real estate developer tries to get this group of people to go. And so bear with me and let's play this little game. I want you all to pick a number between 1 and 10. Don't tell me what it is. Don't shout it out to anybody. Just keep it in your head, put it in your cell phone, put it on your calculator. I want you to multiply that number by 5. I want you to add 20 to that number. Let's add another 10 to that number. And let's subtract 5 from that number. Now take that number and divide by 5. And if you've kept up, now the last thing I want you to do is subtract your original number. Now, if you did it right, everyone listening should have the same number, and that number should be 5. And so I knew that answer before we started. I had the vision and the goal. You all started out with different numbers, or metaphorically with different views. But I wanted you to get to my answer on my hope that you would agree with my goal. And that's ultimately what a real estate developer does. If you didn't get the answer correctly, you did it wrong, and you're actually somebody I fear. So what is a real estate developer's world? Just about every building you use in your life was visioned and created by some real estate developer, including the Dunwoody campus. How did I become a developer? Well, let me give you a little bit about me and my background. I was raised with my 3 older sisters by a single mom in Southwest Minneapolis. My parents divorced when I was 4 and my dad moved out of state. My parents were high school sweethearts in Grand Rapids, Minnesota. My dad went on and attended the University of Minnesota and became a pharmacist. My mom became a mom with 4 kids in 9 years. I started kindergarten when I was 4, not because I was overly bright, but because my mom had to go to work to support us. There wasn't the child care options then as there are now. Growing up with 3 older sisters was interesting. We never had a lot of extra money. I guess we were probably considered somewhat poor, but we didn't really understand that at the time. Most of my bicycles were hand-me-down girls' bikes. I guess I should feel fortunate that that didn't apply to my clothing. My mom worked multiple jobs while simultaneously getting training to become a business machine programmer. My mom was the epitome of hard work and perseverance, and she insisted that all of us get a good education. I attended Minneapolis public schools and graduated from Southwest High School in 1975. I was a better than average student, mainly A's, with a few B's, but I really wasn't enamored with the process of learning. Getting good grades was more about being competitive with my classmates than probably anything else. I attended the University of Minnesota while living at home. It was the only university I could afford to attend. I'd loved going to the U, but I really didn't think much of college. It didn't really seem to be a good fit for me. I had no idea what I wanted to do, and I did not know what classes I wanted to take. It took me 5 years to get through college as I had to pay for it, and I worked as a delivery boy for a South Minneapolis liquor store to do so. Honestly, college was kind of a painful process for me. That was until I was a senior and I had a real open and frank discussion with my mom. She could recognize that something was not right, like probably most mothers can with their children. When she asked me about it, it all came out that I was just really not very happy. I did not really get how college was going to benefit me, as I had no idea what I wanted to do or be. I'll never forget the look on her face when she said the following to me. She said I was missing the point of learning. She said everyone learns things differently and in different ways, but everyone must keep learning. It's the secret of a happy life. She told me that she thought I was focusing on the wrong stuff, that I was going to school for the wrong reasons, that in the end it was not important to remember some historical event or the year Shakespeare wrote Hamlet or some math formula or the name of a star. She said that was most important about furthering your education was learning not about the places or things, but was learning how to learn. That if you figured out how you learned, then that was something that you would hold dear for the rest of your life. That was like a light going off in my head. I needed to learn, but not for someone else or to get somewhere, but for me. It all started to make sense. I signed up for classes for my last quarter at the university. The U at the time was on quarters rather than the semesters that they are now. I took a class in how to speed read. Turned out to be the best college class I ever took, and I've used that through my whole life. I graduated from the U and went back to the MBA program. It's now called Carlson, it wasn't then. And I finished that. They had an accelerated program, and I finished that in 1 year. I came out of graduate school in 1982, and my first job was with Bank of America out of college, or out in California. My initial salary was $24,000 a year, and I thought I was rich. I was never so broke in my life. I had to pay for rent finally, and I had to pay for utilities. I had to make a car and student loan payment. I had to buy suits and ties. I was completely broke. But I went to this great training program at the Bank of America, and they taught me about all the different steps that are involved in banking. I literally was a bank teller for 2 days. I opened up accounts for people. And I actually repossessed 2 cars. It was a really interesting education over 6 to 8 weeks of training. I worked for Bank of America out in San Diego for a few years and then got transferred back here in Minneapolis. There weren't a lot of people at Bank of America in California that wanted to relocate to Minneapolis, so my name got on the list. I came back to Minneapolis and actually got into the real estate business quite by accident. I had a friend in graduate school named Stu Stender. Stu is a very successful real estate entrepreneur here in town. And at the time, came out of graduate school and went to work for a national developer based out of Dallas, Texas, called the Trammell Crow Company. Well, we would get together as people do and have lunch or a beer after work or whatever. And Stu would tell me about his job, and it sounded so interesting to me. And I remember him calling one day that he referred me to a headhunter. He had a headhunter that called him, wanted to know if he would switch companies and go to a different real estate company, and he wasn't interested in doing that. But he gave the headhunter my name. So I ended up interviewing for that job, and I took the job, and Stu and I ended up becoming kind of friendly competitors. I started out as a leasing agent, leasing office and industrial space here in the Twin Cities. But I quickly became clear to me that I loved this business, I loved this industry, and I wanted to learn everything about it. I wanted to learn about development and construction and property management and all the other parts of real estate. I used to go on Saturdays out to construction job sites that were open, and I'd put my hard hat on and my safety vest, and I'd walk right in like I owned the place. And I had a Polaroid camera, and I would probably don't even know what a Polaroid camera is, some of you, but it took pictures and kind of printed them out instantaneously. And I would go and take that Polaroid, take pictures of things, and go back to work with those photos on Monday and ask the people, what am I seeing? What is this going on here? It was a great way for me to learn and understand and to be taught on how to do it. So some people learn by reading, some learn with their hands. I guess you could say I learned a lot by taking photos, and I still do that today. I walk onto other people's job sites. I wear my Doran company hard hat. I walk around the jobs and learn and look and listen. It's a great way to get an education. I really had some great mentors in my career in life. The most important one was a man named Robert Muir, who unfortunately is no longer with us. Robert was a shopping center developer. He was 30 years older than I am, but he took me under his wing and taught me so much about the developing and building of shopping centers. He taught me about staying focused because it's easy in the development business to get diverted and off track. He taught me about getting the job done, but doing it the right way. He taught me about being fair with people. He said, you can be firm, you can have high expectations, you can demand a lot, but you can still be fair and you can treat everyone with respect and dignity. He would tell me not to focus on money. Focus on what you're doing and do it well, and the money will come as people will want to do business with you. We quickly became 50-50 partners and went on to develop and build and own millions of square feet of shopping centers, mainly in the Twin Cities, but thankfully most of which we've subsequently sold. Robert helped build the foundation of what I am from a business standpoint today. In 2007, I went out on my own and I formed the Doran companies. I wanted to pivot towards developing another form of real estate. I saw signs that the retail sector was changing and I thought it was time to move in another direction. When I formed the Doran companies, Robert Muir and I amicably split up our assets, and a few of the people at the Robert Muir company came with me. I wanted to move towards developing and building housing. Everyone told me that this would be a very risky process, and as developing and building housing was so different than building shopping centers. That ended up being true, and that it was very different, but we dedicated ourselves to learning all we could about developing, designing, and building housing. We started out, our first focus was on student housing, and we built several hundred and multiple projects and several hundred millions of dollars worth of that type of product over at the University of Minnesota campus. Our first building was named Sidney Hall, and it was named after my youngest daughter. We then moved towards building high amenity market rate housing, and that is basically what we still do today. During the time from 2007 to 2019, we built the Doran companies from 8 employees to over 400. We started our own construction group. We did so because we felt we could do it better and be more responsive and create a better value. We started our own architectural group, and like the construction part, we felt we could do it better and save money. But it did not take long for the company to have 40 plus architects working on various projects. I remember when we bought the first telephone system for our new office that we moved into in 2007 with 8 people. We reserved 100 phone numbers. And I thought to myself, 100 phone numbers. Doesn't that mean that, well, someday we might have 100 people working at the company? And at the time, it seemed such a crazy thing that we could have that many people working at the company someday. Then in 2008, the Great Recession came. Many in our industry suffered and went out of business. We were actually very lucky and we worked really hard, but we actually grew every year during the recession. 2009 was better than 2008, 2010 was better than 2009, and 2011 was better than 2010. Some of that was because we were still building a lot of student housing at the time, and there was still demand for it. And the other primary reason was we decided early on that we were going to pare down our customer list and that we were only going to do business with the companies that we felt were able to pay us. But that was a scary time. And there were numbers of times when I had to write personal checks to the company in order to make sure that every employee got their paycheck. Our revenues over time went from a few million in 2007 to hundreds of millions per year by 2019. I remember our newly hired human resource director coming into my office when we hired our 100th employee and saying to me that now that we had that many employees, we needed to do an employee handbook. I remember thinking that thank God we reserved all those phone numbers, but then saying to her that maybe it would be easier if we just had fewer employees. We evolved from a development company into a fully integrated real estate company providing development, architectural, construction, property management, and leasing services. We now had marketing, legal, accounting, human resource, and IT departments. We started out primarily building buildings we wanted to own, but quickly started designing and building projects for others. Lots of growth, lots of issues, many more people and roles for people inside the organization continually changing, including mine. I never really intended to build a large organization, but now we were amongst the largest development organizations in the state. But then it all changed for me. In late summer of 2016, I was at home quite sick. My wife, Connie, dragged me to the emergency room. They thought I might have pneumonia, and they did some tests, including a chest x-ray. Turns out that I did have pneumonia, but they saw something else and recommended that I have further testing done. That testing resulted in being diagnosed with lung cancer. Now, I'm not a smoker. I've never touched a cigarette since high school, but here I am with this lung cancer. What the hell does it all mean? Well, luckily, because I had pneumonia, they found the cancer earlier. They removed a part of my right lung. Fortunately, everything appears to be good, and I will have my 5-year cancer-free anniversary this fall. If I had not gotten pneumonia, or my wife had not dragged me to the emergency room, I would likely not be here today. But for those of you that have had cancer, you know it changes you. It's not just a physical thing, it's very emotional and psychological as well. It does not just affect you, it also affects your family and many aspects of your life. And even though my prognosis was good, it changed me and how and what I wanted to do going forward. I decided I wanted to focus or refocus the business part of my life on doing the things that I really wanted to do. And I decided I did not want to run a large organization anymore. So I decided to sell. I sold the majority interest in the company to Ann Barrett, who at the time was our chief operating officer, and a minority interest to Ryan Johnson, who was and still is the chief financial officer. With Ann now the majority owner, the Doran Companies is now one of, if not the largest, woman-owned business in the state. My mom would get a kick out of that her son with a gender-neutral name ends up creating the largest woman-owned business in the state. We kept the property management company as it only managed the properties that we own. And if you saw in the papers in the last few days, we just rebranded ourselves as the Doran Properties Group. The Doran Properties Group has over 150 employees and over $1 billion in owned assets. We will continue to develop and build. We have set it up to be our own builder, but we will continue to use Doran Architects as our designer. We only will develop and build projects that we own. We have no interest in having customers or clients. Pretty unusual for a business to say that. We currently have 3 projects with 600 units under construction, and we have 4 other projects with another 900 units getting ready to start construction or in planning here in the Twin Cities and in Denver. I love this business. Every day is different, and I cannot wait to go to work every day. I love all the different aspects of being a developer. It involves planning and design and construction and legal and finance and marketing and politics. And in the end, you can physically see the results of your efforts. I'm 63 years old and I really have no interest in retiring. I love what I do. I also love the idea that my son, Evan, my oldest son, decided to become part of the company. I never suggested or asked my kids to be involved in the business, as I always felt they needed to make that decision on their own, and only after they had worked someplace else first. I'm excited that my younger son, Kramer, who was finishing his studies, also has interest in the business. He and his brother, Evan, together will make a hard team to beat. I've had the pleasure to meet so many great people in the development and construction business. There are many business owners in the construction industry that started their careers by attending Dunwoody or other places like it. Many of those business owners now have large businesses and have become very successful, and they owe it, in many cases, to the training they received at this institution. They became successful because although they've been trained perhaps as a carpenter or an electrician, they never stopped learning. And they sought out information and training so as to become successful business people. I'm also excited to see the changes come into our industry. More and more technology being used in the design and construction process. Building, but in a better way. Despite the many negative aspects of COVID and the human toll it has taken, it has fundamentally changed our world, our lives, and in this industry in some positive ways as well. The way we design buildings has evolved. The acceptance of virtual technology is another way. What we do today on a routine basis using virtual technology would not likely have happened or happened as quickly without COVID. I'm very excited to see more women and people of color coming into the business and trades. But not everything is rosy. There are headwinds for this industry, just as there are for many others. The world keeps changing. You need to be flexible and adapt. Right now, local politicians across the country are creating faulty policies, in my view, that will create negative consequences for the housing development business that they cannot see or they are unwilling to understand. Tariffs imposed by the previous administration have created product shortages and difficulties in the supply chain. The current increases in commodity prices, especially lumber and in other building materials, are becoming an increasingly big obstacle in our path for creating more much needed housing. But we will keep learning and we will keep moving forward because that is what my mom would expect us to do. So with that, I'll turn it back to Brian for question and answers. And I thank you very much for the opportunity to be here with you today. And you are welcome to ask me any questions on anything you want. Thank you.
Kelly, thank you so much for your great insights. We do have a few questions from the audience, and appreciate your time, and we'll run through those now. What have been the big challenges you've had to face with the pandemic, restrictions, change in building costs, that type of thing over the last 18 months?
Well, I think to start out with, the uncertainty obviously created a lot of issues. We fairly quickly went to remote work. That wasn't just a matter of sending people home to work, but that was also then setting up the technology that allows them to do that. I think we invested nearly $250,000 in technology that left the office. And so that was a big undertaking to get that all set up and get people comfortable in running it. I think the COVID has also created issues in the supply chain. There's lots of difficulties in getting certain things. Appliances are one good example. But part of that is not just COVID. Part of that is the political aspects of tariffs and just kind of the hard talk about foreign trade, particularly with China, has influenced a lot of the supply chain things. But you work through it and you substitute products where you need to, and you move forward.
Great, thank you, and thank you for sharing your cancer journey, and congratulations on your progress. I am also a survivor, and congratulate you on your work. If not too personal, what would you recommend for others facing the same journey? I know it's a little off topic and maybe a little personal, but just thought what has been the things that have helped you through that journey?
Well, I think coming to the recognition that it's not, I think you start out when you're told you have cancer. It's a scary thing to hear. And I think the initial reaction by many people and the people around them is, well, this is just a physical thing and you can beat this physical thing. And I think so many people then underestimate the impact it has on you emotionally and psychologically. And I think in a lot of cases, that's kind of cast aside and put aside. And I just would encourage people that are facing that being diagnosed with cancer, that to think about that aspect, the emotional impact, the psychological impact, not only on you, but also on the people around you, and to reach out into the community to whatever, maybe other people that have gone through it, some sort of professional help or support group or whatever, to address those issues as well as you go down that very scary path.
Great, thank you for that, and appreciate your personal insights on that. How do you see the future of commercial real estate with the shifting after the pandemic, with remote working, and we see a lot of articles and conversations about changing demographics? What's your kind of crystal ball on where commercial real estate will be going in the Twin Cities?
That's a really good question, and I don't know that I have the clear answer, but I think obviously the technology advancements that we've made over the last year in the work environment has opened up all kinds of new avenues for how people are going to work going forward. I know a number of attorneys who are basically working from their cabins up north and have been, for a year and haven't even been in their offices and have really no aspirations of going back to their offices. And so what does that mean for office space? I don't know. Will people still Will they eventually gravitate back because of the social interaction and all the other aspects that goes into a workplace? Perhaps, perhaps not. Maybe for some, maybe not for others. I think it's changing how we build apartments. I think a lot of the buildings that maybe were gravitating towards really small units because people were going to be out and about outside of their apartment are rethinking as to whether that's the right path to go on, and maybe people want more space in their personal home so that they can, if they have to work from home, they have room to do that. You can only work at your kitchen counter for so long, and not have that kind of be a problem. And so there's a lot of ramifications. Transportation systems and things like light rail. Will people use it? And how long will it take us to get comfortable being around each other again? And will that happen automatically, or will that be a longer process to evolve? So the profound impacts, we'll have to watch and see where they take us.
Well, thank you. You mentioned local governments and municipalities enacting misguided policies. In your view, can you expand on what those policies might be, and are you seeing them in Denver as well as in Minneapolis?
Maybe a little less so in Denver, because Denver tends to be a little more libertarian, maybe from a political standpoint. But I'll use one example. The city of Minneapolis passed here the end of 2019 a zoning ordinance called inclusionary zoning, which basically requires that any multifamily development include up to 8% of their units to be built at the developer's cost, to be offered for people who make no greater than 60% of the AMI income. AMI stands for average median income. And so there's statistics out there that have that number. And so you have to target that income bracket or less for those units. Well, the underwriting of that from a financial modeling standpoint is that on average, it's probably about $350,000 a unit to build apartments in Minneapolis now. Obviously, there's nuances and differences in that, but on average, with that income stream based on 60% AMI will support a cost per unit of $150,000 to say $200,000. So the developer is basically being asked to subsidize those 8% units to somewhere between $150,000 or $200,000 per unit. And so if you're going to build a 100-unit apartment building, and you have to have 8 of those units be affordable, that's an additional cost of $1.2 million or $1.6 million or somewhere in that ballpark to the development. And it's basically a development tax. It's a tax that you're being forced to pay by the city in order to build the building. And I think it's going to have a real negative impact on the amount of housing that's going to be built overall, because it's not just important that we build affordable housing, it's important that we build all kinds of housing, because we need that for the marketplace in general. And if we don't supply additional housing, then prices and rents will ultimately go up, and that will make it less affordable for even more and more people.
Good, thank you. Kelly, your business and you've stayed here in the state of Minnesota. What's your belief in why Minnesota strong? Why stay in Minnesota?
Well, Minnesota is actually a very unique place from a business standpoint. And you can, depending upon your perspective, you can go from one end to the other on the different positives and negatives about doing business in the state of Minnesota. But I think the overwhelming positive is the people. I think the people in the state of Minnesota are unique. I think the educational systems that we have in the state are at the top end. And I think, consistently Minnesota ranks very high in quality of life issues and all of the things that are important to people to do that. There are some negative sides too, tax policies and some other things that some businesses object to. But I think overall, Minnesota is a good place to do business. I think it's a strong state that offers a lot of great opportunities when you balance everything out. And I think that's why you've seen so many successful companies start here and grow here and become, leaders in their field, not only in the state, but across the country and even across the globe.
Good, thank you. I have a question that's, Kelly, do you see your work as artistic, and how does creativity work into the real estate development entities that you're working in?
I do see it. I do see it that way. In fact, it's probably my most favorite part of the business is the design side. Uh, Working with the design teams to create places that people will live, and places that, how do they live? I mean, and we go from big scale to down to minute scale. I mean, we talk about, all right, where's the laundry detergent go in this apartment, and where's the extra toilet paper go in this apartment? And so, I mean, we really kind of get down to that level, and but yet at this also have the big scale about how's the building going to look, how's it going to feel, how's it going to touch the earth, and how's it going to fit into the community.
Perfect, thank you, Kelly. We have time for one more question, and I'll throw that out. What do you feel is the most important attribute for success in the real estate business?
I think I think overall the real estate business is relatively small in terms of the number of people involved, and so I think demonstrating that you are honorable, your reputation is critically important. That will go a long way in this business. Like any business, we have some that are less focused on that, but I think treating people right, treating people fairly, and protecting your reputation are key ingredients for a long-term successful career in the real estate industry.
Perfect. Thank you for that, Kelly. And thank you for taking time today to share both your professional and personal journeys, and to tie the work at Dunwoody with the work that you're doing in your development work. Thank you for coming in and being part of our session today. I want to encourage the audience to please join us for our next academic year as we kick off next academic year's LEAD presentation series on Thursday, September 2nd, with Bill George, former Medtronic CEO and noted author and leadership presenter, who will be our guest that day. I want to wish all of you a great day. Get out and enjoy the wonderful Minnesota weather, and look forward to seeing you back for the LEAD Speaker Series coming this fall. Everybody have a great day.